So we all talked about the debate a little earlier on. Our next guest has a different approach. Allan Lichtman is a presidential historian who has accurately predicted the result of 9 of the 10 last U.S. presidential elections. And if you count Al Gore eventually giving in to George Bush, I guess that'd make a perfect 10 out of 10. He's also a distinguished history professor at Washington's American University. He's on the line. Mr. Lichtman, thanks for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm just checking if can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, terrific. I know you're calling in on a Zoom line, so it sounds a little weird, but let me get to first of all the fact that you've been able to do this, and a lot of people will say, well, sure, because there are polls, and you study those. That's not your system. You pay apparently no attention to polls or pundits, right?
That's right. I ignore the pundits because they have no scientific basis for their opinions and no track in predicting elections. I don't pay attention to the polls because they're snapshots. They're abused as predictors by clerks who compiled polls by Nate Silver, who assured us, for example, that Hillary Clinton had an overwhelming chance to win in 2016. So my system is different. It's the alternative to the pundits and the pollsters because it reflects the structure of how American presidential elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And the way it works, if 6 or more of my 13 keys go against the White House party, they're predicted losers. Otherwise, they're predicted winners. And they look at fundamentals like midterm election results, incumbency, contests for the incumbent party nomination, third parties, short and long-term economy, policy change, social unrest, scandal, foreign/military, failures and success. And only 2 keys have anything to do with the candidates, and they're very high threshold keys, looking at whether the candidates are those once-in-a-generation, inspirational, transformational, broadly appealing candidates.
So if I'm understanding this, is the suggestion that never mind about the party who's contesting for the presidency, the party in power is the one that has to answer or fit these keys, and if they don't, they are the losers. In other words, it's not about the other party, it's about the party in power?
You got it exactly right.
Okay.
Keys are always gauged against the party in power, and the question is always whether there will be 6 or more negative keys to predict their defeat or fewer.
So then the question would be, here we are fairly, I don't want to say early in the campaign, there's still not an election for at least, say, roughly a couple of months. A lot can happen, they tell us, between now and Election Day, obviously, but that's not going to affect your particular polling results or your keys right now. Is it too late for anything to change?
Nothing is going to change. Obviously there could be some totally catastrophic, unprecedented event that we've never seen before, but that's very unlikely, and you never can predict that. You only know afterwards. But this notion of an October surprise upsetting the election is the biggest myth of American political history. I've always, for 40 years, made my calls before any so-called October surprise and have never changed my call. Nothing has changed it. Not even, for example, when I made the call for Donald Trump in 2016, the release of the Hollywood access tape, where he's bragged about grabbing women by their private parts. And a lot of pundits, even members of his own party, wrote him off. But the keys are the North Star, the unchanging source of prediction.
And there are 13 of those keys that you base your decision on.
Correct.
So based on those keys, based on the fact that, you think this October, is a myth, what could happen perhaps next month, what do you think happens in this particular election?
Remember, it takes 6 keys to count out the incumbent. I have them down the mandate key because they lost U.S. House seats in 2022, the incumbency key because the sitting president isn't running, the foreign policy failure key because Gaza is a humanitarian disaster with no end in sight, and we're deeply invested there, and the incumbent charisma key because Harris, whatever you may think of her, is not at the level of a Franklin Roosevelt. That's only 4 keys, 2 keys short of what's needed to predict her defeat. That's why the keys point to the election of a path-breaking president, the first woman president in the history of the country, and the first president of mixed African American and East Asian descent, which kind of foreshadows where our country is going anyway. We're becoming rapidly a majority minority country.
So you are calling your keys point to a win for Kamala Harris in the next presidential election.
Correct. And I deliberately issued my prediction before the debate because the big message is it's governing, not campaigning, that counts.
You know, I will tell you this, and I brought this up when we were preparing for the debate yesterday, and I said, I know that people say, you know what, debates don't really change anyone's minds. They're usually not that well viewed, although this one may set a record, I think, if we find out as many as they said, possibly as many as 60 million people having tuned in. Did last night's debate, and I'm sure you watched it, did it change your mind in any way?
Absolutely not. Debates are not predictive. Hillary Clinton won all the debates. John Kerry won the debates in 2004 and still lost, and certainly, it wasn't a total meltdown by any means by Kamala Harris that would have made me, quake a little bit. In fact, according to the scientific polls, she won overwhelmingly.
So nothing changes based on last night's debate. You stand by your prediction now that, again, based on these keys that you always use and have been since, 1982?
Yes.
That Kamala Harris becomes the next president. Nothing between now and then, as you said, short of something catastrophic, will change your opinion here.
Very accurate in your summary.
Okay. Mr. Lichtman, this has been very, very interesting. I thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Allan Lichtman, presidential historian. There you go. Look, I find this fascinating. First of all, it would be great to say, or interesting to say, well, of course, he has 13 keys, so many. But he's been doing this since he called, I think, Ronald Reagan, as I said, in 1982, using these same 13 keys that he refers to them as. And he is confident in saying that Kamala Harris, if you're a betting person, 9 out of 10 is a pretty good track record. He's saying Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. Remember, you heard it here first.